Welcome back to the Deep Dive, listeners. Today we're diving into a true classic, a book that's had a huge impact on so many people. Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
It's a book packed with practical wisdom,
Hmm.
advice that stood the test of time. We're going to break down its key principles so you can really understand and use them.
Yeah, no need to read the whole book. We're going to distill it down to the essentials.
Exactly. Think of this as your cheat sheet to mastering the art of human interaction.
Now, Carnegie structured the book into 4 parts, each focusing on different aspects of connecting with and influencing others.
The first part is all about fundamental techniques for handling people, really understanding the basics of human interaction. Then he moves on to 6 specific ways to make people like you.
From there, he dives into the art of persuasion, outlining how to win people over to your way of thinking without causing friction.
And finally, he tackles leadership, offering principles for changing people's behavior without giving offense or creating resentment.
It's a pretty comprehensive guide, and we're going to explore the most actionable points from each section.
We'll bring in clear examples to illustrate how these principles can be applied in your own life.
So let's jump right in with part 1, fundamental techniques in handling people. The very first principle Carnegie emphasizes is avoiding criticism, condemnation, and complaining.
It's such a crucial point, often overlooked. We tend to focus on what's wrong, but that just creates defensiveness and resentment.
Yeah, when someone feels attacked, they shut down. They're not open to learning or changing.
Exactly. Think about it when someone criticizes you. Your first instinct is to defend yourself, not to say, oh, you're right, I need to change.
It's human nature, and Carnegie understood that deeply. He even talked about how Abraham Lincoln learned this lesson the hard way.
Oh, right. Early in his career, Lincoln wrote a scathing letter criticizing someone, and it backfired spectacularly.
Yeah, it created a bitter enemy and almost led to a duel. That experience really taught Lincoln the importance of empathy and understanding.
So instead of criticizing, focus on understanding. Try to see things from the other person's perspective.
Imagine a manager who's constantly berating an employee for their mistakes.
That employee is going to become demotivated, maybe even fearful, and definitely not perform their best.
Now, contrast that with a manager who approaches mistakes with understanding, maybe even helps the employee find solutions. That employee is much more likely to learn and grow.
It's night and day. The first approach creates a toxic environment. The second fosters growth.
Exactly. Okay, moving on to the second fundamental principle, give honest and sincere appreciation.
Notice the emphasis on honest and sincere. This isn't about throwing around empty compliments.
No, it's about recognizing and appreciating the good in others.
Carnegie believed everyone has something worthy of praise, some talent or quality.
It's about finding that and expressing your appreciation genuinely.
The people crave recognition, and when it's sincere, it can be incredibly motivating.
For example, imagine a shy student who rarely speaks up in class. If the teacher specifically praises a thoughtful comment they make, that can boost their confidence tremendously.
It can encourage them to participate more, to believe in themselves.
Right, it's about seeing the potential in others and helping them see it too.
All right, let's move on to the third and final fundamental technique. Arouse in the other person an eager want.
This principle is all about understanding that people are primarily driven by their own desires and needs.
It's about aligning your requests or ideas with what they already want.
Instead of focusing on what you want, you need to figure out what they want and show them how you can help them get it.
Think about a salesperson. A good salesperson doesn't just focus on making a sale. They focus on helping the customer solve a problem or achieve a goal.
They might ask questions to understand the customer's needs, then highlight how their product can fulfill those needs.
Exactly. They're tapping into the customer's eager want and making them excited about the solution.
This principle applies to so many interactions, not just sales.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to part 2. 6 ways to make people like you.
The first way is to become genuinely interested in other people.
This goes beyond just being polite. It's about actually caring about what other people have to say.
Carnegie pointed to Theodore Roosevelt as a master of this. Roosevelt, despite his busy schedule, made a point of remembering details about the people he met.
He'd ask about their families, their hobbies, their interests.
People loved him for it. They felt seen and valued.
So instead of dominating conversations, try asking questions and really listening to the answers. People love to talk about themselves, and it makes them feel good when you show genuine interest.
Like, if you're at a party, instead of talking about your own vacation, ask someone about their most memorable travel experience.
They'll probably light up and tell you all about it.
Right, and you might learn something new in the process.
Now, the second way to make people like you is a simple one. Smile.
It sounds almost too easy, but a smile is a powerful signal of warmth and friendliness.
It makes you instantly more approachable and likable.
Think about it. If you encounter someone who's smiling, you're more likely to feel positive about them.
And even if you're on the phone, a smile can affect your tone of voice and make you sound more friendly.
A smile can actually change your own mood, too. If you're feeling down, try smiling for a few minutes. It can actually lift your spirits.
It's amazing how such a small thing can have such a big impact.
All right, the third way to make people like you is to remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest sound.
Absolutely. Using someone's name shows that you respect them and see them as an individual.
It makes them feel valued, not just another face in the crowd.
Carnegie tells a story about Andrew Carnegie, the famous industrialist. He was known for his ability to remember the names of his employees, even those he didn't interact with regularly.
And people loved him for it. They felt like he truly cared about them.
Imagine a new hire starting at a company. A manager who greets them by name on their first day creates a much more welcoming environment.
It's a small gesture, but it can make a big difference.
All right, the fourth way to make people like you is to be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves.
This builds on the idea of being genuinely interested in others. It's about actively listening to what they have to say.
People love to talk about their experiences, their passions, their lives. When you give them the space to do that, they feel heard and understood.
And that creates a connection.
Exactly. So in conversations, ask open-ended questions and really listen to the answers. Don't just wait for your turn to talk. Engage with what they're saying.
Like, instead of immediately talking about your week, ask a friend, what was the highlight of your week?
And then really listen to their answer.
It's a simple way to show that you care about their life.
Now, the fifth way to make people like you is to talk in terms of the other person's interests.
This is all about understanding what matters to them and engaging with those topics.
Carnegie told a story about a businessman who secured a deal by researching his client's passion for sailing.
He learned all about the different types of sailboats, racing techniques, all that stuff.
And then during their meeting, he steered the conversation towards sailing, talking about how much he admired the client's expertise.
The client was thrilled. They hit it off immediately, and the deal was sealed.
It's a powerful example of how finding common ground can build rapport and lead to success.
So if you know a colleague is passionate about photography, take a genuine interest in their work. Ask them about their latest project.
You'll be surprised how much they appreciate it.
And finally, the sixth way to make people like you is to make the other person feel important and do it sincerely.
It's about recognizing and acknowledging their worth, their contributions, their talents.
Everyone wants to feel important, and when you genuinely make someone feel that way, it creates a strong, positive feeling toward you.
It can be as simple as acknowledging someone's idea in a meeting or thanking them sincerely for their help.
It's about those little acts of appreciation that can make a big difference.
All right, let's move on to part 3. How to win people to your way of thinking.
The first principle here is a crucial one. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it.
So true. Arguments rarely lead to positive outcomes. They tend to escalate emotions and damage relationships.
Even if you win an argument, you might lose something far more valuable: goodwill.
Think about a disagreement with a loved one over something trivial. If it turns into a heated argument, it can leave lingering negative feelings.
And that's not worth it.
So instead of arguing, try to understand the other person's perspective. Seek common ground.
If you disagree with someone, don't tell them they're wrong. That's just going to make them defensive.
The second principle builds on this idea. Show respect for the other person's opinions. Never say, "You're wrong."
Instead, acknowledge their viewpoint before offering your own. You could say something like, "I see your point, but..."
Or, "That's an interesting perspective I've also considered."
This shows that you respect their opinion, even if you disagree.
It makes them more likely to listen to your perspective as well.
Now, the third principle in this section is about taking responsibility. If you're wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically.
Owning your mistakes shows integrity and humility. It can actually disarm criticism and earn you respect.
If you try to hide your mistakes or blame others, it just makes things worse.
Imagine you miss a deadline at work. If you immediately admit your mistake and apologize, your boss is likely to be more understanding.
You could say, "I apologize, I completely dropped the ball on this. I'm working on getting it back on track as soon as possible."
That shows responsibility and commitment to fixing the issue.
Right, it's always better to be upfront and honest.
All right, the fourth principle is to begin in a friendly way.
This seems obvious, but it's easy to forget when you're focused on getting your point across.
A positive and approachable attitude sets the tone for the whole interaction.
It makes the other person more receptive to what you have to say.
Before making a request, for example, start with a friendly greeting and a brief pleasantry.
You could say, "Hi, how are you doing? I was hoping you could help me with something."
It's much more effective than just launching straight into the request.
Now, the fifth principle is a bit of a psychological trick. Get the other person saying yes, yes, immediately.
This is about building momentum towards agreement.
Start by asking questions they're likely to agree with.
If you're pitching a new idea, for example, start by highlighting the shared goals or problems.
You could say, "We all want to increase productivity, right?" Or, "We all agree that customer satisfaction is crucial," right?
When they say yes to these initial questions, they're more likely to agree with your subsequent points.
It's a way of getting them in a yes mindset.
Now, the sixth principle is to let the other person do a great deal of the talking.
This is so important for persuasion.
People are much more likely to be convinced by their own ideas than by yours.
So instead of lecturing them, ask open-ended questions and guide them toward the conclusion you want them to reach.
If you're in a negotiation, for example, ask the other party about their needs and priorities.
Let them talk extensively about what's important to them.
You'll gain valuable insights, and they'll feel like they're part of the solution.
Now, the seventh principle is related to this idea. Let the other person feel that the idea is his or hers.
It's about subtly influencing the conversation, so they feel like they came up with the idea themselves.
Instead of saying, "We should do this," you could say, "What do you think about doing this?"
Or, "I was wondering if you had any ideas for how to improve this."
When they feel like they own the idea, they're much more likely to support it.
Now, the eighth principle is crucial. Try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view.
Empathy is essential for effective communication and persuasion.
Put yourself in their shoes. Understand their perspective, their motivations, their concerns.
When you see things from their side, you can address their objections more effectively.
You can also build rapport and trust by showing that you genuinely care about their perspective.
Now, the ninth principle builds on this idea. Be sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desires.
Even if you don't agree with them, acknowledge their feelings and show that you understand.
You could say, "I understand how you feel," or "That sounds frustrating."
It's about validating their emotions and making them feel heard.
Now, the 10th principle is to appeal to the nobler motives.
People like to see themselves as good and ethical.
Frame your requests in a way that aligns with their values.
If you're asking for a donation, for example, emphasize the positive impact it will have on others.
People are more likely to act when they feel like they're doing something good.
Now, the 11th principle is to dramatize your ideas.
Make them vivid and memorable.
Use stories, examples, analogies to capture people's attention.
If you're presenting a new product, for example, don't just list the features. Tell a story about how the product solved a problem for a customer.
People connect with stories on an emotional level.
And finally, the 12th principle is to throw down a challenge.
This is about appealing to people's competitive spirit and desire to prove themselves.
Set a goal and challenge them to achieve it.
You could say, "I know you're capable of exceeding this sales target," or "I believe you can complete this project ahead of schedule."
People love a challenge, and they often rise to the occasion when they're given one.
Now let's move on to the final part of the book, part 4. Be a leader. How to change people without giving offense or arousing resentment.
The first principle here is to begin with praise and honest appreciation.
Before addressing any areas for improvement, start by acknowledging someone's strengths and positive contributions.
It makes them more receptive to feedback and less likely to feel defensive.
It sets a positive tone for the conversation.
If you're giving feedback to an employee, for example, start by saying something like, "I really appreciate your hard work on this project. I especially like your ideas for."
And then you can move on to discussing areas for improvement.
The second principle is to call attention to people's mistakes indirectly.
Instead of pointing out their errors directly, which can be embarrassing, use subtle suggestions or questions.
You could say, "Have you considered this?" Or, "What are your thoughts on this approach?"
This allows them to recognize their mistakes on their own and take ownership of the solution.
Now, the third principle is a powerful one. Talk about your own mistakes before criticizing the other person.
This shows humility and makes you more relatable.
It levels the playing field and creates a more open environment for feedback.
You could say, "I've made similar mistakes in the past. What I learned is,
This makes it clear that you're not perfect and that you understand where they're coming from.
now the fourth principle is to ask questions instead of giving direct orders.
This empowers others and encourages them to think critically.
Instead of saying, do this, ask, how would you approach this?
hmm
Or what do you think is the best solution?
People are more likely to buy into a solution when they feel like they've had a hand in creating it.
The fifth principle is to let the other person save face.
Even when you need to address a problem or deliver bad news, do it in a way that preserves their dignity.
Don't humiliate them or make them feel like a failure.
If you need to let someone go, for example, focus on the situation, not on their personal shortcomings.
You could say, unfortunately, due to budget cuts, we've had to make some difficult decisions.
This shows that you respect them as a person, even though you have to make a tough decision.
The sixth principle is to praise the slightest improvement and praise every improvement.
Positive reinforcement is incredibly powerful. It encourages people to keep striving for better.
Recognize and appreciate every step in the right direction.
If someone is struggling with a new skill, don't just focus on their mistakes. Praise their progress, no matter how small.
It can make a huge difference in their motivation and confidence.
The seventh principle is to give the other person a fine reputation to live up to.
Express confidence in their abilities and set high expectations.
People often rise to the level of the expectations you set for them.
If you believe in them, they're more likely to believe in themselves.
The eighth principle is to use encouragement. Make the fault seem easy to correct.
Don't dwell on the problem. Focus on the solution and make it seem achievable.
You could say, this is a minor setback. I know you can overcome it.
Your positive attitude can be contagious and help them regain their confidence.
And finally, the ninth principle is to make the other person happy about doing the thing you suggest.
Frame the task or request in a way that highlights the positive aspects.
Emphasize the benefits, the opportunities for growth, the sense of accomplishment they'll feel.
When people are excited about something, they're more likely to do it well.
So those are the 9 principles of leadership from Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
It's a wealth of wisdom that can help you become a more effective and compassionate leader.
As we wrap up our deep dive into this timeless classic, I'm reminded of a thought-provoking question that Carnegie poses in the book. What if the secret to getting anyone to do what you want isn't about convincing them, but about making them convince themselves?
It's a powerful idea, isn't it?
It suggests that true influence comes from understanding and aligning with the needs and desires of others.
It's about collaboration, not coercion.
We encourage you to reflect on these principles and how you might apply them in your own life.
How to Win Friends and Influence People is a book that can truly transform your interactions with others.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll see you next time. See you then.